Chris, we're back.
Hey, welcome to another One About Swish.
Did you forget our name?
Yeah, I've been so excited about this day.
Oh, I tell you, what a great opportunity. You know, Chris, it just keeps building on excitement and enthusiasm and opportunity and story. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, and that's why we're here.
That's it.
We took a little break, and thank you for being patient with us here. We had some new construction, some renovation taking place, and so we're back on the air.
We got our new red oak table in here now.
We do. Thanks
a lot more
to
room.
The people at Highland Hills over toward Shoals. A group of guys built this for us. And they've been on the podcast a couple times, and they said, hey, you guys need a little bit more room. So they built this for us. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, very nice.
I really didn't want to put grommets in it, but it worked out well. We found little things that kind of help run the cords and a little bit of organized structure here. So
Right.
Anyway.
Let's thank our sponsors to get on with it, huh?
Yes.
Domino's Pizza.
If you can't tell,
Chris is eating well.
Chris is eating well. Oh, a lot of people have been waiting for that line.
And Putter's Bay Miniature Golf.
The only place you don't have to hit it straight.
And Media Pros out of Louisville, Kentucky. They keep us lined up.
The technical support there is something else.
Today we got Shawn Mundy and Samantha Mundy. What an exciting day this is. It's actually Super Bowl Sunday for the history.
It is.
So what a great day this is.
We got the Sam and Samantha show.
That's it.
Or Shawn show. Shawn show.
It's way better than the Super Bowl.
It is. It is a lot better. But first of all, do you know when a joke becomes a dad joke?
No. I'm afraid to ask.
Two in deep.
Yeah.
Not much of them.
When it becomes apparent?
Oh gosh.
I'll tell you what, here we go.
No, really, they said they'd missed those. What's an astronaut's favorite part of the computer?
Oh, I feel like I should know that.
Yeah, not this guy.
Space bar.
Oh, the space bar. It just keeps getting worse somehow.
Yeah.
See, that's what dad jokes are supposed to. They're supposed to keep getting worse.
Oh, I've
Okay.
been raised by the best of the dad jokes. I know.
I've waited for months to do that.
I know you have, and I've been waiting to see what you had.
Oh.
Shawn Mundy, what do you got on your heart today?
Man, we're going to kind of step back in time a little bit today. So it's been a while since some of this stuff's been talked about, just life in general. But my background is I work for a power plant, AES, and I also contract out work mechanic through race teams, doing GNCC's off-road stuff, dirt bikes. And been doing the contract probably about for the last 5 years. Off and on, most of it's been with KTM North America, but they also are owners of Husky and Gas manufacturers. So I bounce around kind of from the Red Bull team and the Rockstar team and helping when they need it. So on this spare time that I don't really have from work.
Mm-hmm. And his 2 children.
But
And wife.
And his wife, yes. And his wife.
yeah, I put them through the ringer on that.
Wow.
Keep them busy.
Mhm.
Did you hear some of those sponsor names?
Yeah.
Those are like
Big names.
big, really big names. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's, they've been good and they've been good to me. So,
Amen.
yeah, and so that's kind of my history going into the power plant. Was for a living I did motorcycle work, mechanic stuff. I did motocross, supercross, enduros, GNCC, world enduros, that type of stuff like that.
Right on.
Yeah, and then kind of got out of it, needing a different path, and got into mechanics in the power plant, doing valve work, so as maintenance.
Did you ever race?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
grew up racing. That's kind of been my whole life for the most part.
Mhm.
Been dirt bikes, so it's good. I got my son, he races, and our baby girl, she's started riding here and there. She kind of fell off the bandwagon with a little bit.
Yeah, well,
But, winter doesn't help that. Keep
No.
the motivation going.
Yeah.
So, but,
it's an attention thing.
yeah. So no, we'll step back in time and kind of talk about, just life and self, how it's led me to
Yes,
where I'm
sir.
at today.
Yeah.
And so we'll get right into the meat of it. So I was born in Evansville, Indiana, June 22nd, 1985.
Wow. A year after I graduated.
Not to make you
Is
feel old or
my,
anything.
is my beard really gray?
At least you have full head of hair. The reason why I wear a hat.
True.
So, grew up, my mom, she had me when she was 17, pregnant when she was 16, so, and then my dad was 20 when I was born. And then it's kind of strange how it works out. My dad's 20 years older than me, his dad was 20 years older than him, on through generations. And I broke that generation by many years.
Yes, you did.
And, so when my mom married my stepdad, well, I'm gonna say probably not much longer after I was born, really.
You were young.
That he was in the military. We moved out to Monterey, California, probably 89, 88. I may not have the years exact right, but it's somewhere in there. It was before the World Series when the earthquake happened out there. So I was out there during that time. And
I remember that night.
yeah, we lived on the military base there, and we was probably out there for a few years, and then come back home. And at this time, I met my dad, I'm sure, when I was born, but to know him, I didn't really know him until I came back. So I was probably like roughly 6, 7 years old, if I had to guess, somewhere in there.
I think that's what your dad said, that you were around 6 or 7.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So I may not have the exact years and date per se of remembering when they were, but and so it was just odd time here. Now I'm coming back from California and now having the opportunity to meet my dad, and it was kind of things were tricky. Here you don't know who this guy is. Here I am coming in and meeting at the city park, hanging out for a couple hours here and there, and then I'm my dad's only child still to this day. So it was kind of one that I could see where it was very awkward for him to have. He never had experienced what an infant baby or any kind of how to interact with. It was just on his own doing his thing. And I'm one of 6, and I'm the oldest. I've got 2 sisters, Candace and Ashley. I got a brother, Corey and Ryan and Adam, and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all ranging from.
Well, you're going to be 40, and I think Adam is in his 30s. I don't know how.
Adam's probably late 20s. Ryan's in his 30s.
I know Ryan's in his 30s. I was thinking Adam was early 30s, maybe turning 30 this year.
He's quite a bit younger. So pretty good little span in there. And so my stepdad at the time, my mom and him were married, had the 2 girls. And when we lived in Monterey, things happened, and next thing we got my brother Corey, different dad.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad was a paramedic and did some work in the ER room out west. And then I think originally was from Detroit. But I think that's kind of what uprooted us to move back from the military-based opportunity to have it. Obviously, the terms of years away from my stepdad at the time was serving. It was times were up, so now we're going back home. And things weren't real good. Things weren't great when we left to go there. And it was things that I found out later on in life, right? So I'm going to say probably 10 years ago, I find out more of what happened through as an infant. My stepdad was pretty abusive. And I always got the blunt of it. I was the eldest, right?
Yep.
So in my role, I kind of felt that was okay. Now I got to protect 2 sisters and a brother. And I remember going to like family functions of my stepdad, and he had rough coming up as well. And he was adopted, but his real family was rough, per se, all the way through the core. I remember going over their house and stuff. Mom always pulled me to the side saying, "Hey, you got to watch your brothers and sisters. You got to look out for them.
Yeah.
You don't just, they were kids." And the family, we won't go into super detail on how things were, but there were some things that brought up, we didn't have a home at the time, and we were staying with actually my stepdad's best friend. And that's what, it's all these years go by, and I'm helping this guy build bikes for his son for the Red Winds motocross stuff. They kind of come to surface, and he's like, "Man, you still talk to your stepdad?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I am blown away." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Do you remember a lot?" I said, I'm catching the drift. I know what you're talking about. And he's like, "Man, just even as an infant," he said, "that's the reason why I had to boot you guys out of the house, because I couldn't take it anymore." He said, I'm talking slamming in the baby cribs because you're crying like you were little. He said, "You wouldn't remember it. But I didn't know if it's something your mom or your parents talked to you." And my mom and dad never really got along. My mom's family didn't like my dad because here she is, 16, having me 17. My dad's 20, so
Yeah.
it was frowned upon. And
That's tough.
Mhm.
and it even put my mom in a weird spot. The family did as well, because I look at it as it was somewhat forced her towards my stepdad that she was married to.
Sure.
They liked him better,
Mhm.
but he wasn't the one that got mom pregnant at a
Mhm.
young age.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, your mom was a baby having a baby.
Yeah,
You know, she was
Yeah.
just kind of forced to be out on her own in a sticky situation, and you know, it was not good from the start.
It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it was. I'm sure it was tough for mom. I'm not gonna say I was a perfect child by any means. I'm sure I caused some grief for sure, but there was just some times, you know, looking back, you know, it was a depressing time.
Yes.
As a kid, but it was what I knew. Hey, you gotta protect care of them. When you come home, if you come home, the beds wasn't made. Hey, sisters, I got it. I'll take the blame. We're going home. I'll take care of it. So it was always, you take your licks and you move on.
Amen.
And,
Wow.
so and they and the siblings were fortunate compared to where I was, I was rather take the licks than them. And he did change ways years down the way and understood, like, man, that was. And still, to this day, we're close as can be.
Mm-hmm. And he has openly, multiple times apologized for his treatment. You know, he was in the Army, he was
Yeah.
a kid. You know, I think,
It was
you
just
can
the
look
whole-
back on it. It was just the time, I think. It just was not.
Mom that always 100% doing what she was supposed to be doing. You know, just, there was all kind of boundaries that were crossed from across the board. And, but no, there was just time, water would be shut off. I remember coming home, no water, no electric. They're trying to figure out how they're gonna pay for it. I remember cars not hardly running. I remember my stepdad buying mom a minivan that she couldn't even drive as a stick shift.
Oh my God.
So here we are having to go to this daycare. And I remember like telling mama, like, hey, you push the clutch in, I'll shift it. And I was like maybe 8 years old, maybe. So here I am grabbing gears in this minivan. For mom, she's driving, and I say clutch, and I'm shifting just to get there. So I said, hey, you just need to leave this thing in second gear and get yourself home. You need to park the thing. So it actually really taught mom how to drive a stick shift vehicle.
8 years old, maybe.
8 years old, yeah. And but man, it's like I was always on bicycles and riding around town. I tell you, when it was really life changing for me and opened my eyes that there was good, was probably more so like 5th grade, if I had to say. So a good friend of mine, we actually didn't like each other at all the way up until 5th grade. Like, I think we fought every day on the playground.
Osborne?
Yeah. And it was like, next thing I know, we're like, hey, you want to stay at my house? I was like, yeah, I'll come and stay. I remember staying there. I was there for like 3 or 4 weeks. And Miss Roxanne was like, Shawn, do we need to go home or do you need to call home? I was like, it ain't a big deal. It ain't bad. Just blow it off. And I remember her picking us up from school, and I remember her saying, we're going shopping. And Brian, my buddy, was like, hey, what are we going shopping for? We're going to go home. We're going to play in the woods and go-kart. Like, we're going to do stuff. And she goes, no, we got to get Shawn some stuff. And I said, oh, you ain't got to do that, Miss Roxanne. She goes, no, I'm going to take care of it. She goes, you're going to stay with us for a while. So she went and talked to mom. I think she kind of seen the situation and what it was. And I think that's when she's like, okay,
Right on.
we're going to take Shawn in with us for a little bit.
Yeah.
And at that time, my dad and I wouldn't say we were close, but I would spend time there, and that's kind of what got me on the dirt bike path. Was my dad grew up riding his whole life, and his dad rode, and my dad raced. He still races to this day. And
Yeah.
he sleeps, breathes it.
Mm-hmm.
And
He sacrificed a limb, I think,
Yeah.
to race a dirt bike, and he's almost 60 years old. So.
but you know, if that wasn't an option to move in with my dad, there was still like a bad turmoil between mom and him, and it was like, you know, child support's always involved in it. It was just kind of, and when I was with him, it'd be like, you know, that was always kind of pressed in. Hey, make sure you don't have a kid. Do what you need to do. Enjoy life. You'll be this, or you'll end up paying it, because he always had to pay back support. I remember always hearing, I didn't even know where you lived out in California. How am I supposed to pay back support? And here, and you can't even see me. I didn't even have the Mundy's last name at the time. I was just stuck with my mom's maiden name. And I remember always like, man, why does everybody else got their dad's last name? And I remember talking to my dad, I was like, hey, I want the Mundy last name. I remember talking to mom, and it was like, no, it was shut down very early on. Until I was like 13, I think, finally, when she rolled out the documents and had the attorney and stuff do their signature and sign off on it and make it happen. So, it was probably before 13. I may have been 5th grade, so what is that, like 10?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, probably that area. But I wasn't really allowed to stay over there all night at that time. But she was finding I really know where I was, friends-wise. If it wasn't for Roxanne driving over there, knowing where I lived and where I was at, who knows how long I would have went on before, hey, where's he's at?
Right.
But like, so 2nd grade, or 1st grade, really, there was, things were rough. You know, stepdad and I, we didn't get along. I wouldn't say he was super abusive to mom, verbally for sure, physically here and there, but man, him and I was the punching bag, and I, from early on, I was able to take licks pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I would push back, so then it just made things worse. Scare the brothers and sisters, you know, they running in their rooms and barreling under beds. I remember just crying. I got to where, you know, I wouldn't even cry. The crying was done. I would just go in and come back out and whatever it was.
Right.
And man, it was tough. And then I think it just led into dark times. And so here I was suicidal at a young age. I'm talking like
You were young.
6,
Mm-hmm.
6, 7, 8, man. What's could be any worse? I've tried multiple times. Luckily, never was successful, but the thought was there, the attempts were there, and they were done. But it was, I was over it. I was like, I can't do anymore. I've done as much as I could, and this is where I'm still at today. And I remember, so they put me on Ritalin. So I think like back in the 90s, it was just like, oh, he has ADHD.
That was the fix.
So we're just gonna give you Ritalin.
Yeah.
So here I am popping Ritalin. And then like mom even got to where, and mom and I was her first, right? So she was a kid, I was a kid, she's raised, but mom and I was very close. I was very protective of mom. Even though that she may not have done everything correctly, but what is, you know, as a parent, what is the correct way other than trying to guide them the best that you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it was horrible, or even my stepdad was horrible, because I'm sure there were situations, looking at it now and how you look at the amount of kids in there, the different dads, and it was like, it was rough. It was a rough time for all of them. And so they put me in charter hospital, actually, because they finally were like, now it's my fault. Now I'm super bad. And now I'm leaving, so I'm like, crap, who's going to take care of the siblings? So now here I am forced to go live in Charter Hospital, which is this place in Evansville. It's not there anymore. So if you know where Chick-fil-A is on the east side,
I remember.
think it's actually a rehab place for
it is.
adults now. I think,
Yeah.
because I have a brother that's had some problems and stuff and has been in there as well. And but that's where I remember going there, and I lived there for like 2 to 3 months at a time. Nobody come see me. Now my dad, I'm not even sure if my dad knew I was really in there per se. I don't know if mom and him told him like, hey, we got him put up in there. But that place was even. I would have rather been at home.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
That was. I remember, man, they take your blood every morning. They were just rough with it, and there was kids in there that probably had a harder going life than I even had, and they were shoved in this place. And it was just violent kids in school. I'm talking books throwing, desks throwing, people choking people. I mean, it was like nuts. And the people that worked there, that they couldn't handle it, they would just grab the whole facility. People working there, it'd be 10 to 15 people on the wing working for, you know, they had it broke up in age groups. And here they are, they're snagging us, pulling our clothes off, and you're shoved in naked into a padded room until they can figure out you're either going to calm yourself down or we're going to try to strap you down. I never was able to get strapped down. I've already been scrapping already early on, so they weren't going to strap me down. And there'd be 4 or 5 of them, so that's where it would just strip everything I had. You know, you just were in dirt clothes, you wasn't wearing regular clothes. No shoestrings allowed, you know, suicide attempts. So they're like, hey, we're not. Can't have that. Had to have like Velcro shoes. They didn't have Crocs back in. So, so here we are strapping up shoes. But so it was in there off and on, and they would do tests trying to figure it out what was going on. And I think at the end of it, they finally decided it was like, hey, winter times, this kid is depressed, like something. It's the winter time, it's the lack of sunlight. So they finally like, hey, this is vitamin D, we think he don't need Ritalin. He needs special lamps and different things, and that wasn't in the budget. Wasn't gonna do that. And then I'd go home and things would get back to where they were, and then back over there I would go again. I remember coming home and my sisters and brother would be like, "Hey, where you been at?" I'm like, "Oh, Mom," and then they'd tell you, "No, they just said you went away." It's like they weren't, a lot of people were kind of closed off in the family what was really going on. And I remember probably second and third grade, I always happened to go like 3 days a week after school for counseling and different things like that. And that went on for probably all the way up until 5th grade. And I'd say 5th grade is probably when my dad and I kind of started getting closer, so hey, I go to him every other weekend. Or that's probably 4th grade, every other weekend. So here, he's taking me fishing, getting me out. And my dad was never abusive at all. He was more like, if I act up or got a little crazy, he was just trying to bear hug and hold me down on the ground because he didn't know what else to do. He wasn't going to beat me. That's not in his demeanor.
No.
And so he was at a loss for it. He's like, man, I got my son that I don't even hardly know, and he's like losing it. I'm not even sure he really knew a lot of the back history of what I was dealing with on a normal base. And so he'd be like, eventually call my mom, and Mom and I was always close. Like, Mom can come over there and calm me down. Like she'd square me up if I wasn't listening. She wasn't afraid to pull back. And so it was just the dirt bike, and then that's when the dirt bikes kind of popped up. And like I said, my dad always rode, but my dad didn't have tons of money either, but he had the amenities and was able to put a roof over my head. Obviously, ideally at that age, it was like, hey, can I live with my dad? And it was instant, no, not gonna happen. Right or wrong, whatever. Mom needed money. I'm sure the child support was helping, but my dad, like, he could see, like, man, you don't have any clothes. Like, what am I spending this money on that you're not getting? I don't know. I'm 5th grade.
Yeah,
I'm supposed to know that stuff. And
it's amazing the responsibility that's put on a young person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not possible. It's really not, unfortunately, but sometimes.
But it's so common, unfortunately.
Very prevalent.
Especially when I think you have kids so young, because you don't know, and you can look back at it now and see what was happening and why it was happening. But when you're a child, all you're going to do is internalize that and take it with you, until you can, as an adult, decipher what and why.
Yeah.
But back to that dirt bikes. I mean, there's no doubt and no question it saved your life.
Yeah, that was my savior for sure. And it was riding a few times, and I didn't know how to interact with Dad. I was like, I couldn't like tell him. It was like, hey man, I love this. Can we get a better bike? That wasn't my thing to ask for anything better. It was like, hey, I got this. Sweet, I'm gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
But I remember, man, that thing, I'd crash it, or if I killed it, it wouldn't start. The flywheel key was always sheared off, and here we are, he's trying to weld this thing. And I'm like, oh, boys. And then other of his friends, they'd always have these little 50s and stuff, and I'd go and ride it. I remember my first time on a Z50. I don't even know if it was actually a Z, it was before the Z50 time. And it was a mini trail 50, that's what it was. And I remember getting on that thing, and they're like, hey, just do circles in the yard. So I'm going, NASCAR one way. And then my dad's like, oh, you gotta go the other way, and straight to the house and AC unit of the neighbors, And but never was scared of it. Just always, that was my way to get away. I didn't have to listen to nobody. Nobody was talking to me really. It was just me and the bike, just in the zone. And so therefore, but there again, it was just a bike. I'd be lucky if it ran half the time. And I was only going over there every other weekend. I was like, oh man, if I live over here, I could ride more, but that wasn't an option. It's like, crap. So bicycles was my thing. So I remember riding all over town at like 7 years old. Here I am on way other side of town, and I'm from Boonville. So and so it'd be one side to the other, because my dad lived on one side, my mom lived on the other, and then so I was always back and forth. It's just one of those things, hey, when it's nighttime, try to be home. Okay, but I could be anywhere and not a clue. Like these days and age, if Mason would have come to me and said, "Hey, Dad, can I ride the other side of Washington?" No.
No,
Absolutely
that's
not.
not going on.
No.
But that man, I just love riding. It didn't have to be a dirt bike. Dirt bike was really like my interest. But like bicycle was like that was as close as I was going to
It'll
get
work.
to it. Yeah, it made it work. You know, I was cutting trails at home when I could, and then doing things and riding. And then my buddy Ryan that I become close friends with early on, and kind of opened up. The lifestyle, the favor. Like, oh man, things can be good. And they were a huge help. And school itself, so I went to Logue Elementary. I started off at Oakdale. I think I kind of got kicked out of Oakdale a little bit because I was like,
He was a wild child.
yeah, I remember like reading time, and they'd say it all in the Indian style, and I would just get up and stomp on the teacher's feet to have a reason why, not really any particular reason.
Right.
Just I was
A cry
getting
for
in-
help. It was a cry for help.
I just would get in the zone and just kind of blank out, and whatever happened, and then it was done. And then I threw a desk, and I know I had to take 2 first grades, got kicked out of one, and then it was like, okay, hey, you're done. We're moving over to this side of town to Logue. So here we are, we moved over by Logue. And then I think my grandmother actually owned the house that she was renting to my mom and stepdad at the time. It's kind of how I think it worked out, that it was budget-wise, that was the best option at the time. And we was able to walk to school. So when people was like, hey, we walk to school in snow, and I legit did. It's that story.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah.
It might have been across the street, but it was uphill both ways.
But yeah, money, as anything, I think back in that time, money was just tight in general, but I remember I have some friends and stuff that had, that were fortunate. And here I am wearing holy socks for gloves, going over to grandma's, and she's like, well, we got some socks, and here I am wearing socks for gloves.
Socks in a bread bag.
Yeah, and hope for the best. And just luckily, good people that I met, shared and did things. So I was able to kind of play and have some stuff here and there when the opportunities were there.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it was a mad struggle from early on up to probably, I would really say 5th grade was probably like I 180'd, like to where parents couldn't handle me, but like the teachers, and even in school, so I was in I call them remedial classes. I don't even know if they call them that anymore.
Yeah, I have no idea.
So I did Special Olympics. Like I didn't know how to read. I didn't know how to do math. Like I do basic math. Numbers are actually kind of my thing. I'm decent at it, better at it now than I am anything else. And but I did all my stuff was in remedial. But so like I would qualify for these Special Olympics, and it was like I thought, man, I hit jackpot. Okay, I'm like, I'm going to Paoli Peaks for ski trips, and I'm like, oh man, where's this?
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I'm doing Special Olympics, and so I did it in track. We'd go to Terre Haute for like 3 or 4 days, but it was the bomb. So here I am basketball, hopping up
skiing,
here, and
yeah.
we're getting on the short bus and we're cruising. And like my siblings are all like, man, where's Shawn going? Why does he not have homework like we do? But I legit didn't know how to read. Like my mom didn't read to me, and I don't want to blow it out of proportion. Mom was a sweetheart, but she just that wasn't. She wasn't going to sit down and really have the time to read.
But she had 5 other kids
Yeah,
to take care of
she was
too.
busy.
Yeah.
And it was a gate opened up. Like, man, I was high rolling doing these events. And multi gold medalists and Special
We still have medals, by the way.
Amen.
We still have them.
So everybody, like my wife, she's like, you're like a Johnny Knoxville. I'm like, I'm not Johnny Knoxville. I said, I completely qualified to be in there.
He just, shouldn't have been.
And she's like, no. And I'm like, yeah. So the school system, in a way, looking back at it now, I wish they would have held me way more accountable than they did. And
I think
it took more of the time.
It was the fact that you were a difficult child. I think I don't want to dog the education system, but it was a lot different in the 90s than it is now. We know a lot more. We have a lot more diagnoses now, a lot more knowledge, but I think it was just easier to write you off than it was to work with you at that time.
Didn't want to deal with
And
it.
it was like
Yeah.
they just the next teacher was like, oh well, he's a difficult kid, he's already in these classes, we'll just keep him there. Oh, he's
Yep.
a difficult kid, he's already in these classes, we'll just keep him there.
Yeah, there was no.
There just wasn't
There
any.
wasn't any help. They were just. I was just another person in the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
And but the teachers would struggle with me, and Mom would have moments where she would struggle with me, and I think it was just once I finally reached that breaking point, during those adolescent ages, and it was difficult. But like the parents of like my friends that I would stay with, like I was a golden child.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember there was
They
times where
still
like,
talk about
yeah.
you like you're the golden
Like
child.
I remember there was like, hey, to where my buddies would be like, hey, tell mom and dad that we want to go to Mr. Gaddy's for pizza. I'm like, why you guys because we'll do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you know, like I always was helping. Like if it was pulling weeds or mowing grass or doing dishes, like I was on point when it was time for stuff to be clean and be right, take trash out. Like you didn't have to ask me. Like even if it wasn't my house,
You were happy to be where
Well,
you
you
were
were just
at.
grateful
Yeah.
for the
it was
opportunity
like,
to stay
yeah.
somewhere.
man, I'm
Right.
getting fed. Like I'm not. But and nothing again. Like the church would bring us food at a young age. I remember them dropping off food baskets and stuff, and like half of it would be expired and this and that, but we didn't care. We would eat it.
Yeah.
Crazy to where I'm at now that I'm weird. Like I don't even eat milk or drink milk if it's like within a day.
No, he's the
In fact,
milk sniffer. I'm like, it's fine. Just drink. He's like, nope.
I'm a
good.
milk sniffer too, okay?
I want to drink one too many sour milks in his life. He's not doing it.
Yeah, so it was it was just kind of certain families, man, once I kind of got in there, and it really helped a bunch. And we went to church when we was younger. And I remember, and I didn't like it, but I think the reason is why we went to church was I felt, and this is like my story of it, is how I felt, that it was a way for mom to have daycare.
Yeah.
Mom didn't go, my dad didn't go, my stepdad didn't go. So it was like, hey, you kids are loading up on a church bus. It'd be like Wednesdays and Sundays, and I'm like, what? No. I'd rather be outside on the block with my bicycle. I don't even want to go. And we'd get forced to go. And I don't think any of us kids wanted to go at the time. It was kind of one of those things where we were just forced to go. Mom would stay home and do whatever they needed to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't a church-going person, and to even say that, I think I always believed in God, but I don't know how or why. Like to where I'm at today, I still can't figure out how it worked out the way it did. Because man, it was tough. And so in my mind, I would have thought like, man, there's no way. I had nobody helping me. I figured it out on my own. Most of everything I figured out on my own. And looking at it now, I wouldn't change it. Would I change the routes of how it went? Yes. But I think if my parents were softer on me and kind of gave in and allowed me, I don't know that I would be where I'm at today in a way. The hard work.
Yeah, I think
and
that's
like,
a fair statement.
the willing to do absolutely whatever it takes to do it.
Right.
And that just led into the racing. Like I wouldn't say I was a great racer, but I was above average. And
You have no quit. That is
No.
the only thing. That is the one characteristic of you. Point. If anyone knows you or has met you for 5 seconds, they will know that Shawn Mundy doesn't know the word quit.
Right.
It's
on.
crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, like if he's running a mile, he's gonna run it in 8 minutes because 10 minutes was his old record, and he just wants to beat it, and he has no quit. I mean, it's crazy to me but that's just you. You just don't have those words in your repertoire.
And I was quiet. I was always
Mhm.
I was a quiet kid. I wasn't loud. Never was I loud or screaming or act crazy. I would just sometimes get in the zone, and it would just be typically at home. Never did we get out of line
In public.
That was not an option.
You
No.
don't play those,
No.
Yeah.
And but no, it was just like I said, growing up right, and then another close, really good friend of mine, and his family has helped me out tons at an early age, would be Chance Mullins.
And Ellen.
Yeah, and his mom, Ellen, my buddy's dad passed away. I never met his dad. So my dad was always into bison hunting, so he kind of, Chance took to my side of things at this time. Things in childhood life's already cleared up. It's swept under the rug, it's gone. So now we're moving into the better years, like
The junior highs. I mean, I think you met Chance, right?
Yeah, 7th grade. I remember meeting him, and I think because I had a pair of like Alpine Star shoes on, so Chance was a big dirt bike kid too. So it was kind of like, who's this guy? He's got like Jeremy McGrath t-shirts on.
Jeremy McGrath, yeah.
But I was like, hey, do you want to hang out? Then it's like one thing led to another, kind of the same thing. I just ended up staying with them all the time, and it was never did my parents ever really like, hey, when you coming home? It was just kind of, I don't know if it's just a convenience for them, like, hey, he's probably in good hands. If not, he'd be able to handle himself, and he wouldn't stay there if he wasn't. So they just I was street smart.
Mm-hmm.
And but man, they were tons of help. Ellen's super lady still this day. And Chance, man, like we kind of had, I wouldn't say we had a falling out in high school. We just had different paths, you know. Like I was 100% like dirt bikes was my thing. I raced all the way up all through junior high, all through high school. Had some injuries, some surgeries and stuff that slowed things down. Do I think I would have made it to the level of the guys that I help out today? I don't think so. That just the talent wise was different. It definitely wasn't a lack of hard work from my end. It was just maybe some of the opportunities. Now, I mean, unfortunately, it takes money to race, right?
Yep.
So and sponsorships help. But I have to say, Suzuki back in probably the 2000s, would give me really good deals on bikes. Like they would help me out. Shane Nally and Rod Harris, they were a lot of help, and that was kind of the foot in the door. They were mechanics for factory teams, and I was like, man.
And they were from Boonville.
And they were from Boonville. So
Isn't that something?
yeah, it's just crazy how it worked out. But I remember my dad taking me to Supercrosses at a young age, and unfortunately, it was always like, hey, you want to go to Supercross? Yeah. Well, it's going to cost you $25. Back in, tickets were $25. I'm like, I'm a kid. How am I going to get $25? And that's where I think where my dad just didn't understand, like, he's a kid. I was his only, and he didn't meet me till older on. And it was just, it was a new familiar time for him. And so here I am mowing yards and doing different things. And I remember Bobby Gorley, a friend of my dad's, and I would help him in the summers, like doing sawmill work. They built cedar homes.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember helping with his just sand and wood all day. But I didn't mind that the cedar smelled good. So.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, he still loves the smell of cedar.
Yeah,
I
to
do
this day.
too.
You can't beat it.
No.
But so that was some help, and then going to Supercross, and I remember going there, and it wasn't so much of the racing. I enjoyed the racing, but it was behind the scenes in the pits. Like I really keyed into the mechanics behind the bikes and what took place, and that's what really piqued my interest. I loved racing. I raced it, and I knew to be a good race mechanic, you need to understand racing. You need to be a good racer. You need to know the format of how it works. And so that was kind of the part of like, hey, I'm going to become a factory rider. That wasn't big in my mind now in high school. It was more like, I'm going to race and keep my foot in the door and meet these guys at the races to slide me in as a mechanic. And I remember, man, just Suzuki always helped. Shane helping me out. I'd get bikes for like $2,700, and if I needed any parts, he'd give me any parts that I needed. Like they helped me out. Rod Harris, same way, and his wife was a lot of help. She was actually in the school in high school, so she knew that I was into bike stuff, and she'd help me out with some schoolwork here and there when she could. And she kind of knew the path of where I was really desiring to go. So I think she didn't, and it wasn't her spot to say, hey, you need to learn how to read. We're gonna get you this, this, and this. You're good enough for this, but you understand racing and you're a good mechanic, and this isn't going to really benefit you. In her mind, this will get you through. I graduated with a 3.8 or 3.9.
Wow.
Didn't even know how to read.
Yeah.
I get test read to me, hey Shawn, is it A or is it B? Okay, street smart, right?
Yeah.
I got this. So I whizzed through school, but didn't know how to do anything in school. But I love going to school. You know, I never missed a day of school, ever. Never. I skipped out of class one time. I remember my stepsister, so my mom's second husband, had 3 kids of his own, 3 daughters. And one of them was like in the same grade. It must have been the same grade as me, but she's in my math class. And I wasn't in math class that day. So she went home immediately, as soon as she could, to tell, hey, Shawn wasn't at school today. It was like the first time I went to school.
He just didn't stay.
And I didn't stay. And I remember talking to the teacher. I was like, hey, my buddies are going right. I didn't have driver's license yet.
15, 14, somewhere around there.
And my other buddies was like Andy Krause and a couple other ones. And they were like, hey, we're all going riding. And I'm like, man, y'all didn't tell me it was today. And so now at this time in high school, I'm living with my dad. So he was, and like I did try to call my dad and say, hey.
In all fairness.
Yeah, and I did try to call my mom too, actually. And nobody answered, so I was just like, and then the teacher's like, I'll let you out back by the school pool. Like our school was locked down. So you couldn't just leave when you wanted. But the teacher, I won't say no names, but she'd be like, Mundy, you really want to go around? I said, yes. I said, I ain't missed any school. I said, I'll go around. I said, I'll make it up, whatever I got to do. She's like, I'll let you meet me back by the swimming pool area. And she opened the door and I buzzed out to the back parking lot of the high school. Hop in, and then my buddy and him and I, and Mike Scherzinger was the other one. I remember hopping in with him, and we were going to pick my bike up and we were going riding. And that was the only time I skipped out of school. Other than that, I went every day. But school was like, man, I knew I was going to get breakfast. I'd be the first to school. I was always the first in class. I didn't like the optics of people looking at me. So I was the first one into class because I didn't want to walk in with everybody looking at me. I was like, I ain't doing that. So I was always early to everything. And my dad was real big about that, like early, show up on, like, you didn't miss the mark. So but man, I knew breakfast, lunch, I was going to get it. So, and I was like, man, this is no brainer.
You see your friends.
Yeah, it was no brainer. Like, home was not better than school. So
Right.
I went to school.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of funny looking back.
Well,
now,
and
and I'm like, man, I really wish I was harder on myself on the school aspect of things, because
Sure.
it does conflict. My boss now, like, it's a joke, but at the end of the day, I do know I need to improve on my Excel skills.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but
Travis.
I mean, you've come so long, and that's what I mean when I say, like, when people meet you, they know you don't quit. If they know anything about your background at all, they know all the work that you've done to get to this point.
We all wish we'd have done things differently.
Oh yeah,
at
I mean, that's
times, so
even me.
that's-
I mean, I was raised, my family. I mean, I was raised
Not
as typical as you can, but
Samantha.
I could go back and change a million things.
Really?
Yes. By the way, I was Steve's neighbor growing up, so the irony there is not lost on me.
Right.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
You're like a princess.
Oh, I don't know about that there, Steve. But yeah, it's Shawn is he's an exceptional human being, and I've always been more than proud of you. Extremely proud of you.
How much time do you spend at the racetrack?
Man, back in the day.
Back in the day, it was 24/7.
I was there all the time. Like, I mean, if there's a race on the weekend, I was there. We did a lot of the Mid-South Winter Series, my dad and I and my cousin Kevin. So we'd always, and my dad's buddy Bill. So there's always a group of us that would go to do Mid-South Winter Series, which would be like Alabama and Tennessee. And this was, I'm driving now, and I'm working. I started working like what I would call full-time jobs. And school was, I'd always do summer stuff with Bobby Gorley, helping out construction-wise, and Kevin Gorley's brother. And then I worked at the car wash. I remember always shoveling mud out of the pits.
Yeah.
But you got a lot of change.
But I got a lot of change. I cleaned out the vacuum machines, and you'd be amazed at what people would vacuum up, man. I remember hitting jackpot. That's like sweet. And it worked out because I was able to use the car wash for free. So now I'm able to wash my bike for free. And the guy that owned it, like, he always took good care of me. And he's like, and he showed me the trick, like how to lock it in, because man, this was old school. I'm in there with a broom handle, like holding the limit switch to keep it open, so I could pressure wash my bike and override the code without putting quarters in it. And it was just different things.
Yeah, and then you worked for the trucking company too.
I worked for Hebner Trucking, so I would do, back then they had school, now they probably still do it now, where it was like, you got out half day or you came in, so we had block scheduling in high school, so either you would come in the morning and go till like lunchtime, and then you would go to work. If you had to show proof that you was working. And then the next day you would not come in until lunchtime and spend the afternoon in school. And I was working at Hebner Trucking, and then now at this time I was staying kind of more with going back to my original stepdad, that him and I, that it just wasn't good. So now here I am, and my siblings were, living with him. They weren't living with mom. And he changed a bunch by now. Like, he was on the right path. He was where he needed to be. And I remember him like, man, just ride the four-wheeler, because I was able to ride the four-wheeler to work. So that was always kind of a cool thing for me. I'm not a four-wheeler guy, but it was like, man, I don't even have to drive.
I'm not a four-wheeler guy.
And, so we're
They're
going
fun.
there, and I remember going to work, and they wanted me to stay there. Like, hey man, we'll send you to school for diesel mechanics and stuff like that, because I really liked working with tools. That was kind of my jam. And I was able to figure out, like, build rear ends and like build transmissions, and like I always become friends with like the old guys at work, the ones that had knowledge.
Still to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd go there and they'd always like bring me underneath their wing. And I'm sure it was probably the work ethic, and I'd always ask questions of here and there, and they weren't like just off the ball questions. They're like, man, he actually knows a little bit about this stuff,
Yeah.
hearing and everything. Like he's fairly slick, and I don't even. My dad was always a good mechanic, and he works on his own stuff, and that's kind of how it was. We didn't have money to go to a dealership.
And your papa was a fantastic mechanic.
Yeah,
I mean, he
my
owned
papa
Mundy's
was a-
garage, so
He was a car mechanic. Do anything. Had more tools. It was like a man's dream in the shop, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the lift that come out of the hydraulic lift to come out of the ground. It was like, man, this is technology right here. And I'm very particular with his tools. You know, had a marked out spot on the wall. And it's funny because I'm like very similar to my papa. Like him and I are looking back, and not even picture wise, like even looking wise, we're like
you're the same person.
the same person. Like and my dad, like he's a good mechanic, but he's not like super particular. He can make it work, and he's like, well, that's fine, it's running. And my papa was one of those, and myself is like, why is it running like that? What was the symptoms? Like what did you do to fix it? My dad's one of those, well, it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fix is there. We just don't know the why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so it was just kind of funny how all that stuff worked out, and then became a mechanic, and I graduated in 04. And I did go to MMI. Wasn't a big fan of it. I went there for about,
Less than 2 years, wasn't it?
it wasn't even a year.
Was it?
It was probably 8 months, 9 months. So I got through the clinicals. So back then they did clinicals. So you do like the basic, like truing wheels, like checking valves, and
Stuff you could do in your sleep.
yeah, just random different things. It wasn't one particular manufacturer, right? So like I chose my main manufacturer that I chose was like Honda and Suzuki. I think then you had to pick like two, and then or you could do Harley and different brands. But I was like, I'm more the dirt bike guy. I didn't want to do dealership work. I was like, man, I'm going to be a race team mechanic. And I went to MMI, and I was working at FedEx too. So I did like hoot owl shift, I think is what they called it. It was night shift. So we're working night shift and go through school all day, and then Miss Harris, which was my school teacher, her husband was Rodney, that was mechanic for Rodney Smith for Factory Suzuki. And I remember talking to them, and they're like, hey, Steve Hatch lives out in Arizona. That's where I was out. It was MMI, I was out in Phoenix. And I was like, okay, and I knew of Steve from racing the GNCCs myself. And Rod reached out to him, and then Steve called me and said, hey, Rod reached out to me, and would you be interested in working on my practice bikes? And I was like, absolutely. And then, so like, there was no time for sleep. Like I was FedEx, school, and then build bikes, and like an hour of sleep. And I worked like 2 or 3 races with Steve and his full-time mechanic at the time, Matt Leach, super good dude. And we're cruising around, we're doing a national enduro out in Arizona. And actually Steve, we won that day. And we went back, and Steve, his parents were there at his house, and Steve's wife and kids, and they said, hey, come to our house for dinner. And I said, okay. And so I drove to their house for dinner after the race, and they sat down and proposed to me to be his full-time race mechanic. Matt Leach, I believe, was kind of ready to settle off the road, and he was working full-time for Factory Kawasaki out of California. So it was an inconvenience to kind of do the West Coast, do the East Coast stuff when you're living out west. And he's just had a different path that he was wanting to go. And I said, yeah, absolutely.
Duh. Where do I sign?
And then he said, well, Kawasaki will reach out to you next week. So I was waiting for that phone call. I'm sitting in class, like my focus wasn't where it should have been. I was just in the zone. But man, we had these instructors that were all about like, hey, you guys wanna go ride pit bikes? Like it was more like a buddy thing. Hey, let's go ride pit bikes, instead of like, hey man, we're legit spending a lot of money to try to learn. And you just want to talk pit bikes, and you don't really know a lot yourself. Right. So it was a struggle for me. I wasn't a big fan of it. And maybe the clinicals, like working for the actual manufacturer, going through that training would have been different. These clinical guys see a lot of students come and go, and it wasn't like one particular thing. So I think it was more of a freely class to kind of get the door open.
I think there was that stigma too of like you had to do this in order to get this job in this industry.
I felt like there was favoritism, like, and that wasn't my thing. Like I said, I was quiet. I didn't know how to read. I could look at a manual and can decipher words, right? But outside of that, like to read and type and write, like that was not my jam. And I remember like working in groups, and but I was always a good people person. Like I can be good one-on-one. And I met a buddy of mine, Tommy, and he was like really good with like computers and loved talking. Like he wasn't shy, didn't meet a stranger. And we'd work in groups, and then him and I were close. And I'm like, man, I can't read that. I don't know how to read that stuff. And he's like, oh, I'll take care of it. You just tell us how the function of it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Tit for tat, trade
Very.
talents.
Okay, just real quick, Chris, are you following these names?
Yeah.
I mean, think about the level. These bikes.
Yeah.
Honda, Kawasaki, KTM, Suzuki. I mean,
And that's just the very beginning of his
Yeah, it's
career.
just-
That's not even the,
Yeah,
the
doors
meat
are
of-
opening.
okay, just for the sake of somebody listening here, what level are we talking about? Amateur, professional,
No, at
collegiate?
So this was like I said, I graduated in 04. So 05 is when I graduated. May of 04, right?
Mhm.
So starting in 05, I started with Steve Hatch doing practice bike stuff for only like 3 weeks. And at this time, practice bike was kind of like it's a good way to get your foot in the door. He was working with a pro rider
Yeah, right.
out of his house.
Okay,
Yeah.
Steve Hatch. Tell people who Steve
So
Hatch.
Steve Hatch is he's an enduro champion, if not possibly a GNCC champion. He was always a top contender in GNCC's. A very excellent rider.
Super nice.
Super nice. Him and his wife, they were always super good to me. Easy going. Like they reached out to, I'm a kid working on his practice bikes, and some people don't know it, but man, you literally gotta have a lot of trust in somebody to work on your bike, right?
The utmost trust, I think.
Because now I'm building a bike that he's got to go out there and perform.
I mean,
on.
That's like going into the holy of holies.
Yes.
Yeah, like
You know,
I
I
don't
mean,
want this
this
thing to
is-
fall apart,
Right.
grenade while I'm jumping or doing something like that and cause big issues.
Yeah, cause big issues.
Big
Yeah.
issues.
So, and of course, here I was shy, so it was like, but I knew my work. And so but Steve, even all the riders I worked with for the most part, even they taught me something on bike. Like I was very keyed in on conversations, and I would always pay attention. And when riders talk, because all mechanics do everything different, right? There's not one mechanic that does the same thing as
No.
the other one. And
And every mechanic is different for every rider.
yeah, because some riders, they want to see something done a certain way that's comfortable for them.
Yeah.
A new guy coming
Yeah.
in doing something like, yeah, we're not used to that. We
Right.
get it may work, but that's not going to work for us.
Yeah, you just didn't get on a brand name bike.
No.
It was custom.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was
For the rider.
It was
For
a
the
lot
rider.
of testing,
The,
a lot of
the
setup.
size,
The
the
testing,
spacing,
yeah.
the setup,
Suspension
everything.
was,
Yeah,
suspension was
exactly.
always super big.
Body weight.
Yeah.
I mean, you name it.
I mean,
They're
that's
so-
what that's
yeah.
your
Crazy, bro.
suspension.
Yeah, and
It's
these
crazy.
guys are
Red Bull.
these are legit athletes. Like a lot of
You
people
think- yeah.
underestimate motorcycle athletes.
Mm-hmm.
They're
You see,
athletic.
you maybe more now, probably the last 10
10
years,
years.
I think people's really noticed, like, man, this is one of the most top demanding sports in the world.
Oh yeah.
I mean, obviously soccer, from what I've gathered, was always kind of like a tier one
Mhm.
sport. Like you
Well, I mean, to put it into perspective, a GNCC, which is a Grand National Cross Country, is a 3-hour race.
Yeah.
3 hour and some change
That's crazy.
most of the time. And that's 3 hours at the top speed that you could possibly go.
Red
In the
line
worst
over the
conditions. That's
Yeah,
tree
you didn't know
roots,
what
that's
you got.
woods, that's hills, that's mountains, for crying out loud. I mean, it's just the endurance that you
these
have to
guys'
possess
heart
alone is
rate-
crazy.
And I could be a little off because I don't pay as much attention to their heart rates and stuff, and more focused on the units of the bike. But I think actually one of the KTM riders, Caleb Russell, extremely well, has done very well for himself in the off-road world. And they did a test. Now I know he can correct me on it, but I'm going to say he probably ran like a 190 or way high for a very long time. But these guys' recovery time is insane, like how quick they recover. And they're holding those high heart rates for a long period of time.
Mhm.
And it's a different style. A lot of people know motocross and supercross. It's exposed more, there's more into it. It can be televised easier and better.
Yeah.
You got these arenas that you can put these banners and sponsors. So it's easier to get people's attraction to somebody like Ricky Carmichael, James Stewart, Jeremy McGrath, Ezra Lusk, Jeff Hemming, all these old guys that were done it forever, and it's got, the sport has level. I mean, it's crazy to where it's at today. I'm sure social media's got a lot to do with it, right? They can expose more and more and more.
Sure.
Back in our day, sweet cycle news or dirt riders coming out with a magazine, we're going to read it, and 5 months later after the race.
Yeah.
Right. You're a little out of times, but that's what we had then.
Yeah.
And so it's, these level of stuff that I worked in was tier 1 guys for off-road stuff. I had really good riders for supercross and motocross. My first one actually was a local kid from here, Shawn Clark. So I worked for a factory in Kawasaki when I was working with Steve Hatch. So we would always have a summer break. And Kerry Clark reached out. I believe it was Kerry or Shawn, but Kerry had to call. He was the one who was going to make the call. He was going to work on it. And I remember them calling me and asking, hey, you already work for Kawasaki. And Shawn rode for Team Green. He was a Cali rider as well, but for the motocross side of things. And I was like, I think I can make that work. It was going to interfere with one race, and I talked to Steve Hatch, but I was able to build both bikes, and my dad actually delivered the bikes to the race, and the semi-driver did the pit stop and kind of maintained for that one race, while I got set up and ready to go to Canada with a Christian-based race team called Team Faith. And so we went and did the Canadian Nationals, chasing that, and man, that was a blast.
Living in a filthy semi.
Yeah, or in
a filthy trailer.
Steve, I'm sure you know Clark or know of them.
Yeah.
But man, Tanya's got some stories too.
Yeah, they're a great family.
Oh, super good. Man, I remember I stayed the night at their house, and we had to go back after the little break we had in Canada. You know, we get all the way up, we're driving through Michigan, now we're to the border of Canada, and here I am with no passport or birth certificate.
You're the guy.
I'm the guy in the
He's that
van,
guy.
and Carrie, stone cold, doesn't miss a beat. Get in the back, hide underneath the jackets. Shawn's loving it. Like, we're living life on the bed, right? We're dancing with the devil over there.
Here we go.
And Tanya, working at the courthouse, so
Yeah.
I mean, she's got something. She's got to uphold her standards.
Smuggling Shawn in. A 6'4" man, by the
And
way.
here I am, like hiding in the back where the dirt bikes are, race fuel, and jackets all covered up. And Shawn, you would have thought Shawn hit the lottery, man. He was so stoked that he managed to smuggle somebody in another country, and we were dying laughing about it. And Tanya and Carrie, they like things very clean. Shawn does too. And so our living habits that we had in Canada, so you got to think about, we had 2 freestyle guys, a team manager / mechanic, myself, me as a mechanic, and then 2 motocross guys. So our freestyle guys would do half-time shows and different things like that, and then they would speak, the Bible and whatnot there. And Shawn, man, it was dirty. It rained every day we was there in Canada. And I was so mad because I'd never seen a bear at this time. So I was like, man, I'm in Canada all summer long, and I haven't yet seen a bear. The only thing I see is rain, and it just rained every race. So we could barely shower because there wasn't enough water for all of us. So it was like, our team manager's like, hey, racers only can shower. And I'm thinking, yeah, I get it, they're dirty, but dude, I'm splashing and washing this bike. I'm actually technically dirtier than the riders. And that didn't matter. And I swear to this day, I think Shawn Clark cleaned his dirt bike boots with my rag. Because when Tanya was cleaning out the Team Faith rig at this time, she was disgusting. I'm pretty sure she probably showered for days straight on how dirty this rig was. And she couldn't believe we was living in this field, but it was really out of our control with the amount of rain we had. It wasn't like we had wash stations. We would find a local laundromat to wash gear. And it was a very tight budget team, let me tell you. It was like, we used the same pan, and Shawn would be able to speak for this too. We used the same pan to cook the salmon on for like a month straight, and it's one of those trays that you would use for a one-time use to take to a party.
A foil tray.
A foil tray. And Tanya just couldn't believe how we were living. But when she come out of that bathroom with my rag, because we had colors, I knew mine was, I'm pretty sure it was yellow.
It wasn't anymore.
It wasn't any. I was
And
going
that
to say
thing come out stiff as a board, and the color was gone. And Tanya's like, "Who?" I said, that's fine, Talia. I said, I swear Shawn's washing his boots with my rag. And, but no, that was my gateway into the motocross world. So I have a lot of respect for Shawn and Carrie reaching out to me, because Carrie's he's picky, you know, in a good way. And I don't blame him now as being a father. Like,
Right.
I don't know that I can just trust anybody to work on my son's stuff.
Right.
I know that you wouldn't trust just anybody to work on your
You
son's
don't get, it's not that, I don't know how to say this, but you don't get to that level without operating like that.
stuff. Oh, sure. 100%.
Respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
Really, but you know, Kelly and Shawn and Tanya, what great people
Oh yeah.
they are. What great people. You don't get to the level at which you're at and where Shawn was racing without doing things the right way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
You can't cut corners.
No, you can't cut corners, and some things that you would think you can do in 20 minutes, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it's never worked. When we go to the starting line, the bike's good, but there's always in the back of our minds as a mechanic is like, man, and you know you checked every bolt 100 times.
Right.
You wore a T-handle out checking bolts,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still always like, man, come on. And me with off-road racing, it was always like, if the bike got within the halfway of the race, then the weight was off my shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anything major was going to happen, it would have happened early on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, when I first got, kind of jumping back and forth here, but when I first started with KTM, so KTM was a tier 1 level team for off-road. I mean, it was the premier team to work for in the off-road. Semis.
It still probably is, I would say.
Yeah, it's semi, so the full deal. And my team manager, Antti Kolonen, which is from Finland, I met him doing the GNCCs with Steve Hatch, and he was over as a mechanic, and his rider was Juha Salmon, which was from Finland as well. Extremely a multi-world enduro champion, and Antti was extremely well in motocross, like really good in his day.
But Auntie is also very particular.
Yes, like he's
Very particular.
very, and I think it's a European way. And later on in the story, we'll kind of talk about that because I spent a lot of time in Europe. And but man, it was just and I made mistakes. Like, man, the biggest one.
Let's say, what is your biggest mistake?
My biggest mistake I made that I won't forget, that always stays with me, and it really bugs me, was we was in PA, and he had a radiator hose part bust. So the radiator was a 3-piece radiator.
Wait, who was this? Was this
David and I.
David?
And we had the lead. I'm talking minutes. We had a big lead, and he had the shroud where it bolts to the radiator. They pulled through, so I didn't have the big enough washers on it. I just missed my mark. And one of the guys that was an R&D at the time, I don't know that he did a fair assessment on it. I think he just was like, oh, that's why the radiator hose broke. But the radiator hose was a 3-piece with a plastic piece in the middle. And the plastic piece, the fitting on the bottom came loose, so it allowed the leak coolant out. But these were pre-made parts. When you bought the part, they come together.
Mm-hmm.
Things we do now is we get rid of those standard clips and put regular hose clamps on these things, so we don't have those mishaps. But back then, they wanted to put the mark on, well, you fudged it up. Well, that's an OEM part, but whatever, I'll take my licks and go on. I did mess up and didn't put the washers on the shroud big enough like I should have.
Mhm.
But that wasn't the root cause of it. They tried to say it was, but I disagree with it. I'd argue that. But the toughest part about working at that time for David was I had 2 bosses. So Auntie Colin, which is the race team manager that I worked with every day, and then I got David Knight that would go back and forth. He's from the Isle of Man, which on a clear day you can see Ireland. Like I would fly into Manchester and then hop across the pond onto the Isle of Man. And he had things he liked a certain way. And as a mechanic, you kind of want to favor the rider. They're the one riding the bike. So you would set things up the way they want it. But it even would get into sponsorship stuff. And David's like, I'm not running FMF. I'm not running FMF. I want to run Agapovic. And I was like, Agapovic? I was like, all right. So we put it on there and he'd test with it. People would take photos. We didn't even know people were in the woods taking pictures of David and I testing this stuff. And my team manager finds out about it, gets a clip of this picture. Hey, what are you testing and what are you doing? We're sponsored by FMN. I said, what do you want me to do? And David's my size but bigger. Like, you're not gonna make this British guy mad.
No.
He'll tear some stuff up.
And David was known, I think, especially at that time, for
Yeah,
being
he can be
a little bit of a hothead.
Yeah, and in an understandable way. Like he gave it 110%.
He's a pro.
Yes,
He is the essence of a pro.
So it didn't bother me. Like he would scare some people, but it didn't bother me. Like I took it as like he cares enough to get that mad. Is the way I looked at
Right.
it. I understand why these riders get that. As a mechanic, we get upset and mad, but we internalize it because we don't want to show any of that to the rider and make him feel uncomfortable. But it didn't matter the other way around.
Passionate about what he's doing.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So like, and I admire that. That was a big, and like I learned a bunch from him on bikes. Very, very well technician as well, and his brother's really good mechanic and rider. So I was just, man, that was a blessing to work with David at that caliber because he won multi-world enduro championships.
Yeah.
He's the reason he won a world championship.
Yeah, we did a lot together. We went to Australia and won the 4-day Australian event over there, and man, we was on a roll. And I remember him telling me like, "Hey, we're young and we're here to make money. What else we gonna do? I said, let's make it happen." So man, we were just on a stretch where we won enduro cross. They had a world enduro that was in New York at the time, and we won that one. And then we won last man standing. We won the tough one in Wales, England. Like we were killing it.
You've been all over the place.
And you won, but you didn't even win. Like you won by like minutes on most of these events.
We still to this day, I think some people will argue with it even in the race world of so in 2007, Snowshoe, West Virginia was the very first event they had there in my era. I think they used to do Blackwater, was kind of somewhat in a similar area, same type of terrain. And but it was new for the GNCCs that I know of. I'm sure there's other people that may say different, but we went there, we won. I can't get down to the second, but it was well over 9 minutes. And I believe still to this day nobody's won by that margin. I would still say David has the biggest margin win.
I have no doubt, actually.
And some people say something because there was always
That's a good woman.
I've done my research.
there was always people skeptical of Thad DeBall, and no hard feelings, Thad, but you were close for a few laps there.
Yeah.
But he's an XC2 guy. He rolled the wheels off that thing for the first half of what he could, but David in that type of terrain was
That's what he was used to.
unstoppable.
And that's mountain terrain, for the record. You know, that's big hills, that's
the
long
Snowshoes, the ski
trees.
resort.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bottomless, holes, natural springs. It was,
You know,
bad.
these are like where camera guys won't even go.
No, if they back then they didn't. We have drones now that can watch it from overhead.
sure.
We can get a lot
But
more better footage now, but yeah, it was. He, I would say, was my for sure tier 1 top-notch caliber. I worked with a lot of great riders that had good caliber too, and the speeds has changed from that generation to now even. But the bikes are a lot better. Now you got training facilities all over the world where kids aren't even going to school or they're doing homeschooling, so the opportunities to become great is a lot easier. It's at your fingertips more now.
well, these are ex-riders that own these facilities that do this training.
They've done the hard work themselves, so now they're teaching it on to the young ones, and it's just raised the level.
Yeah. Wow. World champion.
World champion.
World.
So that's when people always laugh.
Not
It's not a
county,
title that you can
not
just
state.
carry. I'm the
Not a
world
national.
champion of nothing.
So when
I
you
can
look
tell you.
back at it, Chris, from a standpoint of, I was winning gold medals very early on, right?
Special
Right.
Olympics.
Yeah. We just
So
say
it's
the
always-
Olympics in our house. We don't have to clarify.
So it's wild to look back at where I came from, and to this day it was to most people it don't even make sense.
It
There's
doesn't.
an anointing on your life without a doubt in my mind.
There is.
What
yes.
the enemy meant for harm, God turned to the good.
Yes,
and
100%.
It's just wild how things work out.
It's
And
amazing.
I have said-
I mean, I've had tears in my eyes over here just trying to, because my smile, and I'm just like,
I'm a smile crier as
Yeah.
well.
Smile crier.
I'm a
I've
smile
not
crier.
heard that
I-
term.
No, I'm a smile crier. I just get I think too filled with joy or
That's it.
something. I
That's
just
it.
can't help it.
Our daughter is the same way.
Yeah.
But no, but before I got with David, I was, I was with Shawn Clark, and then I helped Shawn in a few arena crosses, and I met Brock Sellers. Excellent guy too, a lot of knowledge, been in Supercross and motocross, done Loretta's extremely well all the way up. And he gave me an opportunity to help him for Supercross. So now here's my foot in the door of like
And Supercross, for those that don't know, it's like
the biggest level.
the biggest level that you can get
I mean,
in the
these
world
are
of
in
dirt bike racing.
football
Stadiums.
stadiums, baseball stadiums, and
Packing
they're selling out.
60,000 plus people. It's crazy.
So I remember standing in the grandstands. I remember waiting in the lines for Jeremy McGrath's autograph and Jeff Hemming and these guys, and even Brock Sellers. And Brock Sellers was always one of my dad's favorite riders, so I knew of Brock. And when I met him at Arena Cross, and it just kind of one thing led to another, and I got to talking to him. I said, "Hey, do you need a mechanic for the East Coast Supercross?" Because Arena Cross was able to do Arena Cross and East Coast Supercross. And he's like, "Yeah, I think I can make something work." And I was like, "All right, perfect." And I got with him, so he did kind of privateer thing for a little bit, which privateer is they get support, but it's not the full factory semi and all that stuff.
Full factory semi.
The full factory.
Yeah.
And
it's-
they get support, but
and
it's
we were
not the full
typically-
factory semi.
And we were typically riding the races with a good friend of his, Kelly Smith, and his family. Super good people too, man. For them
Oh,
to bring-
you know Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's a 250F guy that rode in the lights class, and but no, he was nice enough. He had a motorhome. Him and his family would take Brock and I. We'd go to these races, and I never had my own place at this time, so I'm living wherever the riders are. And I remember I moved to Cairo, Georgia.
Technically speaking, you were homeless for about 10 to 15 years. You know, you just
Yeah, I started early on, but
You lived in a truck. You lived in a truck, right?
yeah.
truck, and literally I was suitcase
Sprinter
my whole
vans.
life.
Yeah. When I met him, he was living in his brother-in-law's house. He was renting it from him, living there full time, and was still living out of a suitcase. He never unpacked a suitcase.
Is that a podcast? Is that an episode
Living
in
out of a
itself?
suitcase. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Well, that and maybe how you guys met, or
Yes,
whatever.
I was gonna say we
Your
could always go
story
into that,
sounds-
but oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it was unbelievable. I was like, "Are you for real? Just living out of a suitcase?" He's
Yeah,
like,
man,
"Yeah, I've never unpacked it."
Yeah, my brother-in-law, Charlie, man, super guy too. Man, I remember him because the bills would get sent to his house, like the electric bill, and I would just pay him. And I remember he got the electric bill one time. He's like, "Mundy, veteran owes you $15." I was like, "Yeah, that's what we're talking about." He's like, "Never in my life have I heard of electric company owing you money." But man, I was like, I knew how to live cheap, cheap.
Very cheap.
And Charlie, man, still to this day, he dies.
It's his
laughing
favorite
about.
story
Yeah,
about you
yeah.
is that the electric company owes
That's
you
funny.
money.
Yeah. Yeah, I can live cheap.
Mhm.
Out of a suitcase.
Out of a suitcase. Yep.
And then, when I was with Brock and doing Supercross, that was a big game changer. For me, it was a game changer. I worked with Steve, and I learned a lot with him and in off-road, and I knew off-road. Like, off-road is what I grew up racing in for the most part. I did motocross stuff here and there, and more so just to develop speed for off-road. And but that was when the lights went out, and you're on the floor, and you're looking at 50, 60,000 people and listening to it. That's when it hit, and it was St. Louis, and I'll never forget it. I remember walking through the tunnel, pushing his bike, and we're right here next to Michael Rocco, Ricky Carmichael, James Stewart, like all these like
Riders
tier
that
one
you grew up
guys that-
watching.
Yeah, that I would stand in line for at the time, and it was crazy how quick it went to where like I didn't want to trouble them. When I was a kid and stuff, like I'd stand in line and quiet, but like now, like there's people that ask me like, "Hey, can you get jerseys and autographs?" And I'm real funny about asking riders for stuff. Just I think being in the background, and they get beat up all the time. They get the wrong impression about themselves from the fans.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, but that's their work. That's their daily way of living. So and I learned that very quickly. That I'm not going to trouble them. I'm here just
To
for
do a
them. And I'm
job.
fortunate that here I am today, walking out on this stadium floor in front of these people. And
you're on the side where you can appreciate
Yeah.
Yes.
And
what goes on.
and understand it.
I'm thinking there needs to be a movie produced here somewhere.
I have said from the start, I'm like, you need to write books, you need to make movies, like we need an autobiography.
This would be a movie without a doubt.
It
I mean, a
is.
book and a movie,
Well,
both.
I
and
remember
when
talking to
Steve-
my brother's dad, my brother Corey. He's in the military, man. Him and I got a super soft spot for him.
You have a super
Yeah.
soft spot, I think, for anyone in the military,
Yeah, it's
especially at that caliber, you know, that level.
And,
Yeah.
man, he's done a lot of good for himself. And he's now a Black Hawk pilot, so he got through all that at an older age. I think it was
Wow.
very close on if he could even get in there.
Right.
He just wanted a career change. You know, he's got a family. He didn't want to have to be out in the field all the time doing things that most people don't want to do, right? And he just his dad. So I talked to his dad a little bit, and this has been years ago. And his dad worked for Blackwater, so a friend of Eric Prince, that was the founder of Blackwater, a private contractor group, a long time ago. And he was the aeromatic back for them. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, man, because those books interest me. Like that type of stuff is interesting. I can actually, once I learned how to read out of high school, like that's how I learned how to read, was by reading these Lone Survivors by like Arcus Trail, you know, different, like that stuff really, like that's what got me to read. And
Yeah, it was interesting to you.
Yeah.
It wasn't Dick and Jane here and there
Right.
and whatever. I mean,
See
this
Bob
was
Run.
yeah.
yeah,
It was-
piqued my interest. And I remember talking to his dad about, you know, man, that stuff's cool. And he's like, no, he said, what's cool is what you do. And it's funny how when you do that line of work, it's not as cool, right? When you're behind the scenes,
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
it looks that cool, but it's really not.
Well, I think a lot of people see the glitz and glamour of an event like Supercross, but don't see the side of you living out of a suitcase.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
don't see you having a dirty wash rag that
It's a
has
hard
been washed
life.
boots.
It
Yes,
is.
it's
It's a hard
very
life. It's
difficult.
not easy.
And the budgets are tight, man. You
Yeah.
know it. And I think a lot of people think, man, these guys make tons of money. Some riders do. Some are fortunate, and some mechanics do. I was fortunate to make it, to make a living out of it. Not everybody has that opportunity, but
Yeah.
I was fortunate to do that. And but I remember him telling me, he's like, man, you can write a book, like, because he knew my childhood life a little bit. He knew.
I think it'd be a great book and a great movie.
And I'm like, no,
Well,
you can,
without a
you
doubt.
can write a book. And he's like, no, there's tons of stuff out
Come
there.
on, I can see the little kid in the Special Olympics right now.
That's what I'm
And then
saying.
just doing his thing, living at the friend's house,
Yeah.
just, Mom, Dad ain't contacting me, I'm cool.
Yep.
I'm
Just
cool,
riding
man.
under
I'm
the
just,
radar.
yeah, just yeah.
He was right under the
No
When
good
we
as-
passed by the French Lick Springs Hotel, his favorite thing to do is go, hey, I carried the torch in that hotel.
Yeah, the crazy part is they wouldn't let people carry an open flame inside of the old French Lake Hotel. I'm thinking, man.
That was okay then.
Yeah, right.
I
We know a
remember-
thing or two
So my
about it.
buddy Osborne, right, that I was staying with, I remember him saying, man, how can I get to go to these events with you? And I was like, I don't know. So we're like plotting how we can get him to go. And I ended up telling my teachers, like, hey, can my buddy Ryan go? He does help me on my homework. So now they're like, oh, he's kind of student council, right? And I was like, I don't even know what student council is, but
Sure.
yeah, that's what it takes. And
Was it Ryan or Ozzy?
we call him Ozzy.
But yeah, you did call him Ozzy.
Yeah, we call him Ozzy. And finally, I talked him into letting him go, and he couldn't believe it. And I remember going there, and they chose me to run this torch down through there. And Osborne goes, I can't believe they don't let you run that open. I said, I know, right? Don't make sense, does it?
But there you were.
Here I am running an open torch down through the building.
A very old,
Yeah.
treasure building, no
Yes.
less. But
So, yeah, going back to Brock and opening the doors, Brock was a lot of help. So he was kind of more towards his way out a little bit, just age-wise. I think just ready to do something different. And he was married, and so I think the paths were just changing. And he was able to help me out to get on with Star Yamaha, which is one of the premier teams now. But back then it had Martin DeVos and Brian Johnson, Matt Gorky, and a couple other guys on there, I believe. So they always split East Coast and West Coast because it was a 250 team. They didn't have any 450 teams, any 450 riders at that time. And so I was Brian Johnson's full-time mechanic, but I would help out Martine, and Martine's full-time mechanic. Mark most of the time stayed out west. There was times that I stayed more in Cairo, Georgia, and I was roommates with Martine Vallos, and so we got to become really close friends and working with Star Yamaha. And I was there for pretty much most of pretty much all the outdoors, and then just went different paths after that.
When did you do the reality TV show?
So that was with Brock. So
Also, he did a reality TV show, guys.
Yeah, jump back in time here. So this is early 2000s.
Episode 2.
Yeah.
I've seen the episodes. They're phenomenal.
Yeah. Wow.
And so here I am.
Was it Reality of Speed?
It's called The Reality of Speed on the Speed Channel. And Brock and I was privateer early on. And this, I would say, is more of a factory deal, but kind of private. It wasn't full factory. And but they had the semi, they had all the stuff. We had a little bit more parts available at hand. We had a race shop that we worked out of. We traveled out of. We lived in Dallas, Fort Worth. And Brock went there, had an opportunity to go there when David Villeman left the team, and then so it opened up a spot for Brock. And this would be 450 stuff. And I remember them questioning about Brock having me as a mechanic, like the guy that's Lucky's son, that also helped on the race team. I think did more kind of the motor stuff. Was a big fan of Brock, but wanted to be Brock's mechanic. So it was everything they could do not to have me aboard the team. And Brock, man, he stood by me. He was rock solid and just said absolutely not. The only way I'll come is if I can bring Shawn with me. And they did that. But man, it was that was a tough battle. I met a guy there that was Steve Boniface's mechanic, Vince. He was from France, and him and I become really good friends. And he was kind of like me, kind of quiet, but stuck to it, very professional. And he would help me out a bunch. And I remember one time, right before the Dallas Supercross, he come to me. He's like, "Hey, there's a few things you need to check on that bike. I know what's his name was messing with it." And I was like, "All right, duly noted." So I checked my stuff, and there was some stuff that they tried what we would call sabotaging a little bit. They weren't a big fan of me, but luckily Vince was there and caught some of the stuff and helped point it out to me.
And that's not super common in
no, that's like one in the air, but that group was tough. That particular person and his dad, they were very, very tough, and they wanted it their way, in no way. And luckily Brock, he stood by me and he made sure that they made things right for me, and if they didn't, he would. And Vince and I become really close, and we didn't get into the Hollywood part of it. So they had a reality show, and they would have these girls pretty much not wearing anything. They had what you would call, I guess, a crop top. I don't know what you would call it, but it was barely anything. And they were like hanging all over the bikes, and there'd be cords hanging all over the same TV. And I was like, no, I didn't like that. It was just in a way, and it was unprofessional in my way. But I get it. It was a way of living, and it was a big sponsorship for them. And it helped out the team, and at the end of the day, it put food on my table as well. But it wasn't the professional scene that I liked.
Yeah.
And that was evident because basically Shawn hid from the camera the entire time.
Yes.
Like you could see him in the background a little bit, and he's like.
So I would have to do interviews, and I remember I won the Top Tech Mechanic Award for the night. So I don't even know if they do it anymore. But MMI used to give out this Top Tech Award, which was kind of ironic that I left MMI right early on, and they're giving out these awards. I think it was like, I could be wrong. It may have been $500 to $1,000, but it'd be the big check, the fancy stuff. I mean, you'd be going down it may have been for the heat race once you qualified into the night show, or that may have been even for the main, I can't remember. And Brock tried a different motor. I wasn't keen on it. And he's like, yeah, I want to try it because Lucky was like, hey, we need you, this motor's better. Tell him. And I'm like, we haven't proven it. And I'm real funny about change. I do not like changing things.
Midway through
on race day.
Yeah.
That's not a thing to do. I guess that's not a place you want to be.
Right.
It's never worked well for anyone who's tried.
And I remember, here we go in qualifier, and Brock didn't like that motor. And you don't got much time.
Yeah.
And Steve Boniface was injured at this time, and Vince, his mechanic, was there. It was a local race for us. It was a big deal. All our sponsorship was there. We were sponsored by Dep Hair Gel. And back then, if you could see pictures, I'm sure Sam can find some. And you guys,
yeah.
We'll make sure you guys get a look at those. And So it only fit the par, right, that I had a hair gel sponsor.
This real spiky, crazy
Yeah,
hair.
you know, the 90s, you know, or the 2000s, we had the black hair or highlighted and it was spiked, you know, you had a little bit of a goatee type thing, and that was just, you know, black socks, and it was kind of black dicky pants. That just kind of fit the part of the industry at that time.
Right.
Well, hey, yeah.
And
Gotta do what you
and
gotta
that
do.
motor coming, I remember Brock was mad, and I was mad because we even went that route. And Brock's like, I want my old motor back in there. And we don't have, I'm talking 15, 20 minutes, and we're swapping out a motor.
Which, you know, I know that's, so I've watched you swapped out motors.
And
It
back
takes
then,
a
it was
minute.
harder back then than it is now. Some people may say different, but man, now the bikes are made now where you can get to stuff and actually kind of work on. These were the older Honda
Yeah.
motors,
Yeah.
and it was 4-stroke, and it was just a pain in the butt to get in there. But Vince, man, super nice guy. He's like, I help you whatever you need, and he knew, like, we had a process and we did things very similar. So he was able to really help me get this. He would make sure the old motor, he'd get the, you know, make sure the carburetor was off, and then make
He
sure
could
that-
anticipate what
Yeah,
you
he
needed.
knew what my next move was, and we got done. Here I am sitting on the seat, and we're wide open trying to get to the last chance qualifier in the stadium. And I'm tightening seat bolts as we're riding down the tunnel. And I'm like,
Hail Mary.
we're going to give it all we got.
Here we
And
go.
lo and behold, he makes it into the main event. We got into the main event that night. And that main is when the lady, Erin Bates was her name at the time that was doing that role. And she come. I remember her coming up, and some of the mechanics like, "Hey, I think you're getting an award." I'm like, "Nah, probably not. I hope not, man."
He's gonna
I'd
have
rather
to go on
not have
camera.
money than be on the TV. Like
Right.
I just here to do a job. And so she comes over there and says, "Hey, Mundy, I got something for you." I'm like, "Oh man." So now here I am, like, having to remember myself, like, man, I need to thank all these sponsors. As that we had to help the riders, you know, we're writing on the pit board sponsors that they need to thank, you know, because you do forget when you're
Yeah.
in the moment.
Yeah. Oh,
And when
yeah.
these guys, especially after a race, and these guys are on the podium and stuff, and you're holding the pit board, like, so now here I am in the spotlight on the big, these big
Which is a
screens in the
mechanic is
Dallas
your worst
Stadium,
nightmare.
the massive screens on each end up there. I'm up there clear as day, and I'm like, like Ricky Bobby, you know, what do I do with my hands? And multiple of these interviews, and it's just like, it's funny because over time now, like,
You've gotten much
it's
better.
it become natural, and I guess in a way, I guess that's a good thing that happened because it meant good stuff.
Yeah.
That happened is why you got it. So it was just a learning curve for me. Coming from where I was, I wanted to be under the radar. I didn't want any scenes, and then, like, you know, and I didn't know, like, I would fail out of English classes. So, like, I wasn't good at talking. I just wasn't good at any of that type of proper way of
You're
talking.
very well spoken now.
And,
Yes,
I've gotten
he's
better.
come a long way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, then after that is when I met. I got with Shawn Hackley. That's been after the Star Yamaha stuff. A kid from out of Texas, and he just went through Loretta Lynn's, which Loretta Lynn's is the big motocross amateur event.
The
It's a week
outdoor.
long, and it's like it's the premiere of amateur racing in the world. Kids from all over the world try to qualify for these events at Loretta's. It's a week long of racing. It's a 3-moto format. They can race multiple different classes. They got mod and stock classes like that. But Shawn won, done very well, and got a ride with Moto World Yamaha and sponsored through Toyota. So I remember we had to go to Vegas, and he received his Toyota Tacoma truck. So it was when the new Tacoma came out. They were sweet looking, right? And so here we are, him and Kyle Chisholm. There's another kid in there. I remember we all had to go out to the desert and do these photo shoots. I'm just thinking, like, man, how in the world am I here doing photo shoots with these guys? And Shawn, so I was doing Hackley's practice bike stuff. They had a full-time mechanic there. They were on the fence. So the race teams are always kind of, all of them, they're a little better now maybe.
It's just a lot of change.
But back there was changes all the time.
Well, there's always change.
Always
I mean,
change.
And riders would change it. Sometimes the riders would
Yeah.
want a different mechanic, and then they leave it. It was just a different time. I think it's gotten better. And as with Shawn, and we went to James Stewart's house to spend a weekend. He was doing some riding there, and I remember sitting on the couch, and it was at Big James's house, James Stewart's parents' house. But James and them, they all lived right there. And James came there for a little bit, and I remember Malcolm Stewart, James's little brother.
Who also just won
Yeah, he
his
just
very
won
first Supercross
Yeah,
last
he just
night.
won his very first 450 Supercross last night in Tampa. So it was cool to kind
Last night.
of
Last night, literally last night.
Yeah.
Watched it.
450.
Yeah.
And he was like 12, 13 years old. And he was in Vegas at the last, it was either the last race or the very first, they did like a US Open. I can't remember which event it was, but it was an event at the MGM. And here we are, when I was just talking to Sam about it. I was like, we're walking through the MGM, so it's a casino. And he's 12, 13, I'm guessing, Malcolm. And he's over there grabbing these slot machines, pulling this stuff, and I'm walking through, and I'm the oldest out of him and Shawn, Hackley. And the security come over there, they're jumping all over him, who's his parent guardian? And here I am, I'm like, I guess it's me. So they're telling me, and I'm like, it was a funny deal looking back at it. And I don't even know if Malcolm would even remember it.
I bet he does.
But I remember us going to like the magic show, the store there at MGM. They had magic tricks, and like he was buying, like he's getting these magic stuff. Like it was just funny to see it.
Well, I think to me, I love it because I hear these stories and then, like, I watch Supercross and I know these stories and I'm watching this grown professional man like win this event and I think back to like you going to the casino with them and you have all these stories of these people, and then every time we go to a Supercross event or a GNCC or anywhere where there's professional teams, riders, mechanics, whatever, 9 times out of 10 they know Shawn. They'll call him by name, they'll sit there and talk to him, and it's just like he just doesn't. He's been in the industry for so long, it's almost like he's a legend too. Like, that's how it feels when we go to these places.
I wouldn't go to legend part, but
But that, from my perspective, that's what it feels like.
I remember we were sitting there in Big James's place, and we were sitting on a couch, and I got a call from KTM. So I'm like, oh, call, I answer, and it's Auntie. And he's like, hey, Shawn, this is Auntie. And I said, hey, how you doing? It's been a little bit since I've seen you.
Sure.
He's like, hey, I got an opportunity for you. He said, I want you to work for David Knight. And I was like, and at this time, I kind of left the off-road, the wood stuff. I was like, okay. I was like, I didn't know who it was. He's like, he's looking to win the championship. He said, it'd be good for you. And I said, can I have time to think about it? I'm at James's house with Hackley doing some riding and testing, and then we'll be heading back to Dallas to Hackley's house. And I said, I can reach back out to you there. And I hung up on that phone, and I talked to Big Shawn, which was Shawn Hackley's dad's name was Shawn, so we called him Big Shawn, and James Stewart's dad's name, James, so we just called him Big James.
Big Shawn, Big James.
And so we stood in there, and I said, man, I got an offer from KTM to go off-road for David Knight. And I remember James Stewart was sitting on the opposite side of the couch in the living room, and he said, David Knight. And I said, yeah. And he said, that's an opportunity you need to take. And Shawn Hackley, I think, was actually upstairs with Malcolm. So him and Malcolm were more similar. I mean, there was an age gap, but they were closer than, say, Shawn Hackley and James Stewart. And but Big James was down there, and Big Shawn, and then little James. And I said, yeah. And he's like, that dude just beat Stefan Everence on Stefan Everence's backyard sand motocross. He's like, that dude is bad. And hearing that from James Stewart, and I don't know if you know much, Chris, about motocross, supercross, but James is,
how many championships is that? One?
A bunch, and won a lot of races. Like he's
up there. He's up there with the best of the best.
Yeah, he's very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear that from him was kind of like, and Shawn, the kid I was helping, he was understanding, and his dad was. They're like, man, that's an opportunity. We can try to fight for you as a race mechanic here, but I don't know what Motor World Yamaha would say. I don't know what path they've got, but we definitely would love to keep you as a trainer and build the race bikes. And I was like, and I was always loyal to my riders. I give them everything. Most of the time I lived with them. Different things, and I felt bad about it. And I was like, man, I don't know, but they encouraged it, man. They were like, that's a championship opportunity for you. You need to go do that. And so when I got back to Dallas, I called Auntie, and they flew me to Ohio, and I checked out the race shop, and You know, it was the real deal.
Yeah, I can work with this.
Right. Yeah.
And it worked out because it got me closer back to home to where I can see my siblings, you know, because I was pretty close to my I'm not as close to my sister anymore as I was. You know, life just takes us different ways. We all get kids and do our thing, but man, my sister and I was really close. My brothers and I were really close, so it was an opportunity to come back home. I'm a deer hunter, you know, I like deer hunting. And I was like, I can't do that in California or in Texas. I mean, you can in Texas, but it just wasn't the same as the Midwest here, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a gateway to get back closer to home ground and able to do the hobbies that I like to do.
You know, we're probably going to have to wrap this up.
Wow.
But yeah, will you come back?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, and
This is
I
a
mean,
good time.
there's a lot more stuff. I realize
No, I was
that.
gonna say that's the sad part. You're just
You're
just grazing the surface.
You're just breaking in.
You're just to summarize the last hour and a half plus. Isn't that something?
Ooh, time goes by fast.
Yeah, it does.
It does it. When you sit down here, I mean.
You are already at the top of your game, Shawn, and you get a phone call from this gentleman and presents to you an opportunity, and the guy on the other end of the phone says he wants to win a world championship. And who did he call?
Yeah.
Shawn Mundy.
Isn't that crazy? That's what I'm saying.
So
guys. It's nuts.
it's just not a phone call.
Straight out of the Special Olympics.
Literally.
He wants to win a world championship,
this
and he
guy,
calls you Shawn.
That's what he was bringing here was to win.
And with David, I think it's important to know that he and Shawn are very similar people. Not only just in looks, which is weird, but also your personalities and how serious you take things. And like, I think David had his doubts up until he met you, and then he was like, "Oh no, this guy's the real deal. Like, let's go, let's roll."
Yeah, we.
But
we
Auntie knew
well.
that you had what it took to make him
Auntie
win the
believed in me,
championship.
and that was good of Auntie to reach out because he only knew me from track walks. Like me and Steve would be riding bicycles on the track or walking sections by him and his rider. Like we were competitors, but we gained a friendship throughout that time as mechanic to mechanic, and he looked out. I know, and as we talk down the path, there's other stuff to the story, but
But your reputation, I think, is just what gave you the keys to your success. You know, it was like you were willing to do the work, you were willing to put in the time, you were willing to learn. You weren't the guy that came in and said, "I know better than you." Like you always took someone else's advice and took it into consideration.
Even if, even some of them mechanics I met has got some different ways of not doing things. But
Well,
always
there wasn't an ego in the room that they had to
You're
fight
a
for.
Absolutely, you have to do that.
Yeah, and I would even
have to
do
do that.
mechanics and stuff that didn't do those styles of events. I would try to help them out. I would never try to dog one person or say, "Hey man, he's useless" or "he's not worth a lick," because things take time. I was there. I wasn't. I made little mistakes, and luckily the rider stuck with me, and then we worked through it. And it's a mechanical. Things are going to happen. Not everything is in your control. All you can do is what you can do. At the end of the day, let it work its course.
You stayed focused.
Yes, 100%. You never let that focus waver.
Still to this day.
Did you win a world championship?
Yes, he did.
Well,
you know
that's a
what?
wrap.
That's what I'm saying. And what's even crazy?
We don't have anything else to talk about.
We won the Grand Cross Country. We won.
You won more than one, yeah. But what's crazy to me is like, so his teachers, he was obviously in these remedial classes, and his teachers had to write out these like these diary entries almost of like, what Shawn can do to improve, how can he do this better, what are his life goals, blah, blah, blah. So when he's like, I don't know how old you were, I have a picture of it, but your goal was to be the best mechanic, I quote, and win championships. And by God, if you didn't do both. I mean, and just talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, just the faith, the work is just crazy.
We're our own prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can speak things into existence.
Mm-hmm. And
If we
he
really
did.
believe that.
You're still doing it. Look at me. Look at the life that you
I know. Look what you gave.
Yeah, well, that's where I was going with that, but we'll take it.
No, there's definitely more to the story.
Yeah.
So.
Will you come back?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, we need episode 2.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do.
We didn't know that episode 1 was going to be this extensive.
Oh
did
no,
we?
this
Sorry.
is it just goes just that quick. So, thank you,
No,
Thank you.
thank
both
you.
of you. Wow, Chris, thanks. It's nice to be
Thanks,
back.
Steve. It's good to be back.
Hey, Domino's Pizza
Because Samantha, if you can't tell, Chris is eating well.
Chris is even well.
and Putter's Bay Miniature Golf
The only place you don't have to hit it straight.
and Media Pro Production,
They keep us in line. They keep us rolling.
Yeah.
They are a big help to us.
along with a couple of our children.
Yep. Ellen got me a new
T-shirt.
one bounce
Little-
swish T-shirt.
Little
There's only
merch.
a couple of
Is that
them.
what they
Yeah,
call it?
little
Merch?
merch. Yeah.
You guys need some merch.
Yeah, we do.
That's
That's
the
what I
next
said.
All right. Well, they're going to come back, and we're going to.
Thanks,
do
Shawn.
this.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your
Yeah.
story. Still tears in my eyes for just grinning.
It's amazing
It's
to
good stuff.
go.
Yeah, it's
It
good
started out
stuff.
rough. It was, it was rough early going, but I think it's why I am the way I am.
Well, you got your focus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've always said it's a focus issue. And
Yeah.
you've remained focused.
Yeah.
Quite an
want-
accomplishment.
We want to come back and maybe get more into your story and also how you two met.
Yes.
Oh, that's a fun story.
Yeah,
I bet.
Yeah, so yeah, you all just broke the surface.
I mean, this is Washington, Indiana, and Boonville,
Yep.
Yeah.
Evans. I
Yeah.
mean, just right here in
Mhm.
our own.
Yeah.
Tiny
Anyway,
community.
Thanks, Steve.
you're welcome.
Appreciate you.
We-
Love y'all.
We love you and thank you very much.